All right, well, I've only got a few minutes this evening, but I wanted to touch base with y'all. I ran across a book as I was looking through. I didn't even realize I had it in my bookshelf because I had put some duct tape on the cover because it's falling apart. And it's a very interesting book. I thought I might read just a touch of it. But it is called Moses and Monotheism, and it's by Sigmund Freud. This book I think was published in 1939. There's some pre-war bits in there as well. He talks about the Catholic Church and some other things as well. Probably try to stay away from politics and so forth. But he is interesting in his thoughts concerning the beginnings and wanderings, etc., of the Jewish people. So I thought I'd just read just a little bit of it to you and see what you thought. Since it is falling apart, we probably will not come back to it. I'll just leave it in the bookshelf and call it a day there. So the historical premises is section 1 on page 72. This is part of part 3, Moses, his people, and monotheistic religion. My dogs are expecting their mother anytime soon and are on guard and ready to bark. So if they do, I apologize, but that's what dogs do. The historical background of the events which have aroused our interest is as follows. Through the conquest of the 18th dynasty, Egypt had become a world empire. The new imperialism was reflected in the development of certain religious ideas, if not in those of the whole people, yet in those of the governing and intellectual active upper stratum. Under the influence of the priest of the sun god at On, and he calls that Heliopolis, possibly strengthened by suggestions from Asia, there arose the idea of a universal God, Aton, A-T-O-N, no longer restricted to one people and one country. With the young Amenhotep IV, who later changed his name to Akhenaton, a pharaoh succeeded to the throne who knew no higher interest than in developing the idea of such a god. He raised the Anton religion to the official religion, and thereby the universal God became the only God. All that was said of other gods became deceit and guile. With a superb implacability, he resisted all of the temptations of magical thought and discarded the illusion, dear particular to the Egyptians, of life after death. With an astonishing premonition of later scientific knowledge, he recognized in the energy of the sun's radiation the source of all life on earth, and worshiped the sun as a symbol of his God's power. He gloried in his joy in the creation and in his life, ma'at, truth and justice. It is the first case in the history of mankind, and perhaps the purest, of monotheistic religion. A deeper knowledge of the historical and psychological conditions of its origin would be of inestimable value. Care was taken, however, that not much information concerning Aton religion should come down to us. Already under the reign of Akhenaton's weak successors, everything he created broke down. The priesthood he had suppressed vented their fury on his memory. The Aton religion was abolished, the capital of the heretic pharaoh demolished and pillaged. In 1350 BC, the 18th dynasty was extinguished. After an interval of anarchy, the general Haremhab, who reigned until 1315 BC, restored order. Akhenaton's reforms seemed to be but an episode doomed to be forgotten. This is what has been established historically, and at this point our work of hypothesis begins. Among the intimates of Icton was a man who was perhaps called Thathemes. Sorry, these names are difficult. As so many others were at the time. Well, there you go. This, for example, this is a footnote. This, for example, was also the name of the sculptor whose workroom was discovered in the Tel El Amarna. So that was his name, as so many other people were called. The name does not matter, but its second part must have been Moshe, or Moshe, without an S. He held high rank and was a convinced adherent of the Aton religion, but in contradistinction to the brooding king, he was forceful and passionate. For this man, the death of Icnon and abolishing of his religion meant the end of all of his hopes. Only prescribed or recanting could he remain in Egypt. If he were governor of a border province, he might well have come in touch with a certain Semitic tribe which had immigrated several generations before. In his disappointment and loneliness, he turned to those strangers and sought in them for a compensation of what he had lost. He chose them for his people and tried to realize his own ideals through them. After he had left Egypt with them, accompanied by his immediate followers, he hallowed them by custom of circumcision, gave them laws, and introduced them to the Aton religion, which the Egyptians had just discarded. Perhaps the rules of the man Moses imposed on his Jews were even harder than those of his master and teacher Akhenaton. Perhaps he also relinquished the connection with the sun god of On, to whom the latter still adhered. For the exodus of Egypt, we must fix the time of the interregnum after 1350 BC. The subsequent periods of time until possession was taken of the land of Canaan are especially obscure. Out of the darkness which the biblical text has left there, or rather created, the historical research of our days can distinguish just two facts. The first, discovered by Ernest Sellin, is that the Jews, who even according to the Bible were stubborn and unruly towards their lawgiver and leader, rebelled at last, killed him, and threw off the imposed Aton religion, as the Egyptians had done before them. The second fact, proved by Edward Meyer, is that these Jews, on their return from Egypt, united with tribes nearly related to them in the country bordering on Palestine, the Sinai Peninsula, and Arabia, and that there, in a fertile spot called Qades, Qades, they accepted, under the influence of the Arabian Midianites, a new religion, the worship of the volcano god Jahve, Jahve. Soon after this, they were ready to conquer Canaan. The relationship and time of these two events to each other and to the Exodus is very uncertain. The next historical allusion is given is the stele of the pharaoh Merneptah, who reigned until 1215 BC, which numbered Israel among the vanquished in his conquest of Syria and Palestine. So I thought that was interesting. He basically believes that there was a small band of Canaanites, Semites, in Egypt, and perhaps these were in some way enslaved, etc. Nobody really knows. But that these, at some point in time, left Egypt, went back to Canaan, and took their newfound religion from Egypt with them. So the book is very dense. This was about the easiest part to read. If you haven't studied your psychiatry recently, you might want to brush up on that before you give the rest of the book a read. But it's very, very interesting. I find the theory interesting. Obviously nobody knows for sure whether the Bible is accurate in the numbers that they talked about. You know, these could be legions, they could be, it's just hard to say what the numbers were, and there's quite the controversy on that. So anyway, I thought you might enjoy that little tidbit. I'm going to look at two books coming up that I have on my iPad, the Shema and its blessings, because we did talk about Shema briefly. And this one is a little bit easier to read than Arthur Green, although once again, I really enjoy Dr. Green. This is part of the series, My People's Prayer Book, and it's under the heading of Traditional Prayers and Modern Commentaries, Volume 1. The second book I'm looking at is Minyan, M-I-N-Y-A-N, which of course you all know what that means, and it's 10 Principles for Living a Life of Integrity by Rabbi Rami Shapiro. So anyway, let's look forward to those in the future. Hope everybody has a good day, and thanks for listening. Shalom.